Our central topic is Shalom Bayis. But Shalom Bayis incorporates. Shalom Bayis actually represents real life. It is not just a question of how you relate to your spouse and how you work things out in the house between the two people, but how you work things out in the house, even you as an individual. And therefore, it requires also attention to certain things that are of a general nature, but it definitely is an important part in Shalom Bayis as well. In a very simple way, if you are not happy, that translates in unhappy relationship. So therefore, we will touch today on an issue that is more individual, not so much in the interrelationship, but is a vital point because it is present in almost every household. We hear all the time people feeling inadequate, unfulfilled due to their duties and responsibilities as a result of marriage. The truth is, you hear this more from the women than from the men. But on the other hand, it is true for men too. Because men too, as a result of their household responsibilities, cannot really choose. They can choose what they do. They have responsibilities, and quite often they are relegated to doing kind of work that they would not choose to do had they the choice, and yet they are forced to do it. And they complain to themselves and complain to whoever would listen that, as a matter of fact, I'm kind of wasting my time on realities. Sure, I have a responsibility, but I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel I'm really accomplishing. Certainly, women quite often have that feeling that, as we expressed it in the very early sessions, where the woman feels she's stuck with the kids. And stuck with the kids means she's stuck in the house, and she feels this very much unfulfilling. We'll discuss this in a broader sense. And as a result of that, there's unhappiness, there is sometimes it sets into a kind of jealousy. Why should he? Why shouldn't I? And all kinds of different things that result from this principal difficulty. And I want to take up this subject and discuss it from ground up. What is the basic or the origin of this attitude, of this feeling? The origin of this feeling is in our perception of ourselves. and our perception of the world around us. We perceive the world, and the world in a broad sense, and even in a narrow sense in terms of our immediate society, our friends, our community. Naturally, like the Rambam says, that a human being is naturally inclined to interrelate socially. And therefore, the Rambam speaks in terms of what type of society a person should choose. He should make sure that he will learn only good things and so forth. But it's inevitable, the point which I'm drawing from that is, it's inevitable that a person naturally wants to interrelate and must interrelate. That's a natural thing. But where that takes us is that we begin to perceive and judge ourselves through other people's eyes. We evaluate our own activities not from an internal sense of value, but what does it look like from the outside? Because for some reason which we'll discuss, we perceive that the outside, the way we're perceived by our group, the way we're perceived by the community, the way we're perceived in a broader sense, that's the reality. This is what gives us our real value. If we are perceived, if we are perceived as successful, as active, as accomplishing by our immediate environment, immediate surroundings, and that means that we are successful and accomplished, because that's the real thing. As a matter of fact, there is basis for that perception even in Torah. There is an interesting halacha. The halacha is, we know, that so far, until the time of Mashiach, until the time of Tchias HaMesim, people have a limited number of years. And every person that we have heard about, that we have known in the past, eventually reaches that end. And this is called in halacha, if in halacha there is a question, if you don't know the state of a person because he is far away, there was no telephones in those days, and you don't know whether he is still alive or not. And it has to do, there's a halachic question, many halachic questions that are dependent on that fact. So we have to have a halachic principle. How do we deal with this type of a question, of a situation? Shem or Meis? Perhaps he died. And if he died, the whole situation changes. So there are two questions here, two possibilities. There are certain things that where the question is Shem or Meis, perhaps he died. There's other things where the question is Shem or Yomus, perhaps he will die. So the halacha is that on an individual person, Shem or Meis lo yamnio. Halachically, the principle is we don't say, no, but we don't accept that possibility that maybe he died. We assume that he's alive because last we knew that he was alive, so we assume that he's still alive. Shemo Yomus, but perhaps he will die, that we do so. Halachically. And those things that are decided on that basis, that we cannot start doing because something will happen, that is halachically correct. That pertains to an individual. A community, an established community, regardless of its size, if it's an established community, the halacha is ein tzibur meis. Tzibur does not die. And this translates in our mentality is that what is the real thing that we should judge ourselves against? The tzibur. What is the tzibur say? What is the community say? And when this is drawn to the extreme or beyond the proper limits, where we actually begin to judge ourselves against the community, in other words, from other people's perception, then we actually lose self-awareness. We lose the sense of evaluating our own deeds. And then, of course, the result is that whatever we do inside the house becomes a burden, because this is just doing things at the level where it doesn't have true and real value. This is not something that is perceived by anyone. It's not something that anyone will say that there is accomplishment there is something interesting being done. You're just doing your own duty. This is true, as I pointed out, even if one was not exposed to the secular world. Even if one grew up in a Torah environment, there's also that sense and that perception. But when we expand upon this, and we actually examine what the world attitude is, then in fact it becomes almost total. That what is the value of any of your activities, anything that you can prove to others that you have accomplished. Anything that is of value to you as an individual does not count. Except if you really enjoy doing it. So then you've spent time enjoying something. But if you don't enjoy it, and you're doing something that is thrust upon you, quote unquote, by duty, by obligation, by responsibility, then in fact, you are not engaged in anything worthwhile per se. It's just that you must do it. You must. In this sense, you must do it. I want to cover every nuance in this. You must do it Because if you don't do it, the ramifications and the results are very negative. What will happen if you don't do it? So therefore, your feeling in engaging in this activity is all negative. It's just a pressure, whether it's a pressure from outside or an internal pressure because you're scared of what will happen if I don't. But there is nothing positive about it, that you are actually pursuing something that is worthwhile in and of itself. And as a result, of course, we can all project and recognize what type of unhappiness that brings, and what the resultant interrelationship it brings into the house. I don't have to describe it, just very briefly. The husband comes home from work, and the wife turns to him and he says, "You were a whole day outside, and you were doing what you wanted." Who knows whether he did what he wanted? Maybe he also was under pressure from his boss. And he too was nagged and unhappy because he has to work for someone, he's not doing his own thing. But neither one of them really recognized what the other one has gone through. He comes home and says, "Oh, you were in a peaceful situation and I was being nagged by my boss." And she says to him, "Well, you were outside in the big, broad world and I was cooped up in this little house." And this brings about a whole lot of different kind of controversies, which I don't think needs to be elaborated because from the smiles I could see that everyone else answered. And I want to take you along now into a thorough investigation of our situation here. To get a sense how the Torah really views our presence in this world. And what our lives would look like, should look like, and will look like in Yitz Hashem when we recognize and understand the truth and the beauty and the profundity of this view. The first verse in the Torah is Breishis Bora Lekim Vashamayim V'Zoretz. That the very first thing we must know is that God created Shamayim V'Oretz. Shamayim V'Oretz is not an accident. It was intentionally created by God. No one here thinks that Shamayim V'Oretz is an accident. They all ma'aminim, they all believe in creation. But how many of us really relate to it that way and perceive it that way? We know it historically that that's what happened. But what is the world that we personally live in? We personally live in a world just happens to be there. If I stumble on something, this thing just happens to be there. How do we really relate to the world as a reality presented and being presented to us on an ongoing basis by the Creator Himself? But there is even a more profound significance in this. God created each and every one of us. None of us are extra, are extraneous, are occupying a space in this world that belongs to someone else. Not only is the space that we occupy undisputed ours, but it has our presence in this world. Each an individual has a godly significance. We really belong here. God himself wants us to be here. When we go to work, we don't go to work because we must. Something is pressing us. And if we don't, we're going to have severe consequences. But this is a godly requirement. God wants us to do that. This is a different perception of reality. It sounds a little profound, a little philosophical, something that may require reflection and thought. But we know that the best teacher is experience. What is the experience of our lives? What does experience mean? Experience means simply the following. If I drive my car through a red light and I get into an accident, or a cop stops me and gives me a hefty ticket, I know that driving through a red light is not a good idea. If I pursue a life on the basis of an idea that there is nothing real about my life, and I have to do it because of one pressure or another, I become frustrated and unhappy. And therefore I know it's not a good idea. I have to seek an alternate way to relate to life. This is not a cop-out. What I'm pointing to is we have this frustration, and we all look for ways to alleviate this frustration. What is the way we're looking for the alleviation of this frustration? We're looking for something more interesting to do. We're looking to, each one in their own way, whatever it is, to change what we're doing so that it'll become more interesting, it'll satisfy what we think we're missing, and we can spend a lifetime filling this and never reaching it. The Gemara gives a klal. You know what a klal is? A klal means a ruling without exceptions. It's a klal. No one has died, left the world, having satisfied half of his desire. And the Gemara illustrates it very, very simply. Yesh le'imona, if he has accomplished and he accumulates 100, immediately He sees that 100 is nothing. He now wants 200. If he has accomplished 200, he instantaneously senses that this is nothing, and he wants immediately 400. This is not rhetorical. This is absolutely true. We experience it daily. And therefore, when we are pursuing the path of changing what we do, looking for some kind of fulfillment from one activity to another, in exchanging our place in life with our husbands or with our wives, we are barking up the wrong tree. This is not what is missing. As intelligent people, let alone the fact that we are frumayid, but I'm talking, push it from the point of view of happiness, not even in terms of avodas Hashem, in terms of coming on sundown and having a healthy perception of life, a healthy view of life. One has to recognize the truth of a phenomenon before he can know how to act under it. We have to understand what is the truth of the phenomenon of living. And you have to relate to that. Then we can start thinking of what do you have to do, what are the requirements, how do you pursue it, and how do you accomplish it. Therefore, although, as I said, it sounds grandiose, it sounds something that requires a lot of thought, it doesn't. It's a simple result of daily experience. And if we are not fools and learn from our experience, the old adage that who is the fool who repeats his mistakes. That's a very simple principle. We're banging our head against the wall, and the wall stands there, and the only one who gets hurt is the head. Therefore, from simple intelligence, and simple practical smarts, it's incumbent on us that we should begin to perceive life in the true light. As long as life, whether we believe, of course we believe God created everything, but as long as our practical life is insignificant in itself, and it's an accident, and everything that happens over there is just pressure from outside, and all happiness comes from some kind of external perception, we are doomed to frustration. Now let's go into real life. The real life human life differs in principle from the Havdu animal life. It sounds like a truism, but we have to examine what in fact is the difference. The animal is alive, and the Havdu is a human being is alive. We know what the Torah says, that an animal is our property, and we shecht it and we eat it. We can do anything we want with an animal. Apidin Torah. without cruelty and so forth, but normal activities, it's our property. A human being, this is Mama, is the greatest thing in the world. Everything is cancelled out when it comes to human life. There's nothing greater. What is the difference? Everybody knows the difference, but I want to bring it out. In principle, the difference is, although an animal's life is finite, it lives whatever years, even if it lives a natural, or a natural life out, there's a limit to its life. Lahavdil, the human being, also has a natural limit. However, the animal's life is in fact limited. It has these few years that lives, and then it's ended and doesn't exist, wiped away. The human life, every moment of the human life is an eternity. Human life cannot be measured in terms of days, months, years. Because human life represents the presence of the Meibashter in the world. Eden's life represents Hashem's presence in the world. And therefore, Eden's life, every moment is an eternity. And as a matter of fact, halachically, the halacha is that when it comes to saving a human life, it makes no difference what state he is in. As long as he's alive, you do everything absolutely necessary to preserve that life for one more moment. Why? Because every breath that a Yid takes, a human being in general, particularly a Yid, every breath is representative of God's presence in the world. I have a few minutes. I will elaborate on this because I'd like you to understand this. This is not some kind of fantastic statement. This is very, very real. And explain what it means. The human being lives on oxygen, which is carried throughout his body in the blood, which is pumped through the heart. The heart pumps the blood. The blood gets oxygen enriched in the lungs, and this blood is carried throughout the body, and this brings life to all the limbs in the body. Seems very simple. The heart pumps continuously, incessantly. We know, Rahman al-Islam, if a person gets a stroke, God forbid, what happens then? The heart stops pumping. A stroke doesn't affect the heart. It's not a heart attack. A stroke affects the brain. Why does the heart stop pumping? Because for every pump that the heart takes, the brain has to tell us to pump. It's the brain that controls the heart. The real highest is in the brain. The brain says, pump, and the heart pumps. And if the brain stops telling the heart to pump, then the heart stops pumping. But the heart doesn't have highest life, a neshama on its own. The neshama that's in the brain tells the heart to pump, and that's how that's why it pumps. Why does the brain tell the heart to pump? Because the brain wants to live. Why does the brain want to live? Because it perceives the presence of God. And thus, every breath that a person takes represents the godly presence in the world. This is the nucleus. This is the moment of human life. This is the true moment of human life. Therefore, I wouldn't expect us from this discussion, to start thinking in terms of, in real terms of godliness and so forth. But one thing we can incorporate in our lives. We can incorporate in our lives the recognition that our lives are extremely, extremely valuable and significant. To the extent that every moment of our lives represents eternity. And therefore, what is valuable in terms of life's activities? That which carries an aspect of eternity. That which is temporary is an abuse of life which is eternal. Now let's go back to the original saying, quote, I'm stuck with the kids. What is more eternal than raising children? Or whatever, this is just a quote, but really in whatever a person does. When the man goes out to work and he is doing things that he's not very happy, he's not very pleased, he's not very proud of doing, but he's doing it because he must do it to earn a livelihood. Instead of coming from the perception, as we described before, that if I don't, there are going to be these ramifications and these results, and things are going to boomerang. He must reflect and get his encouragement and strength from a totally different view. This will be help to pay for my family's upkeep. This will help to pay for my children's education, or chinuch. This will help to pay for my children's bar mitzvahs and chasanas. That's what's central in this whole activity. And therefore, everything becomes meaningful and significant and sweet. Sure, there are discomfort, but these are superficial relative to what I'm really doing, what my life is really about. The similar thing goes for the woman who is taking care of the home. which again, as we said before, superficially, from an external view, seems to be doing very simple things such as changing the diaper, lullabying the baby, screaming at the kids while they get dirty, and all of those things. But in fact, what is happening here? She's raising children whose hearts pump because their brains tell them to pump, because their brains perceive God. And with this, they're going to continue and develop in their lives. Now, I must put in a little bit of a qualifier so we should understand the complete picture. This does not say that a person should not take a break, that the wife does not need a break from domestic duties she shouldn't take. This perception itself should satisfy. There has to be a break, there has to be a relaxation, there has to be a moment where she relaxes and does not have the full burden of duty, both on the physical level and so to speak, an intellectual and emotional level. I always remember the story, this kind of an analogy. There was a Yid, Michael Lipsker. I don't know if anyone knew. Michael Lipsker, everybody knows Rabbi Lipsker from Seagate. His uncle was Michael Lipsker. Michael Lipsker was a shliach from Rebnach, from the previous Rebbe in Morocco. He was the first shliach in Morocco. And subsequently he moved here, his whole family is here. For some reason I had kind of an affinity with him. I knew him from Europe yet, I was a little kid, but I had some kind of respect for him. We used to talk. So he tells me, a mother with a house full of children, and every day at a certain hour she would lock herself up in her room for an hour, and all the children knew that during that hour they cannot call mommy, they cannot cry, they cannot complain about anything. She's not there. She will not respond. And this one went on and on. Couldn't have gone on for too long because they had children, but still it went on for whatever period of time that she was raising her kids. Finally, the kids are curious, of course. They tried to look into the keyhole, so there's nothing happened. Nothing, can't observe anything. Mommy, what are you doing there? So the mommy says, over there, children are making for you a mommy. So a break is necessary, because you have to have a mommy the mommy needs a relaxation at the moment, needs a moment of a break. But this does not mean that she's breaking away from her children, that this is a burden. There's just a limit of human nerves and muscle and the strength and how much she can carry uninterrupted, and she needs that break. But during that break, what is she doing? She's making for the children a man. And she is not frustrated by this. She doesn't feel that her life is being abused and useless and insignificant and meaningless and simple. She's very proud of the fact that she's making for the children a man. It is extremely meaningful and important for us to recognize the reality of our lives. Everyone has activities, and he has duties to perform. But he must also recognize that the reason he or she has these duties is because she has a significant life. And we must not lose sight of this very simple truth. But simply from a practical human perspective. How can a human being acquiesce to view his life as that of a burden, that of duty without meaning and purpose? In Mitzrayim, the Jewish people were subjected to all kinds of labor. But the principal pain of that labor, besides that they were abused, their lives and so forth, but the labor itself, the principal pain of that labor, the Torah describes as being avodas perach, not the labor. Avodas perach. Even a laborer who builds a pyramid receives the fruit of his labor is not paid in the same way as avodas perach. The Torah describes it avodas perach. And what does perach mean? Perach means that it crumbles, it breaks up. It is not the labor that was painful. It is that the labor crumbled the soul and crumbled the body. How did it crumble the soul and the body? It was labor without purpose. And the halacha, the Torah says, you know that at the Torah there is such thing as a Jewish slave. For 6 years, whatever the halacha is. And the Torah says that you're not permitted to work him avodas perach. He can be your servant, he can do whatever service, valuable services he can provide you. But avodas perach, that is not permitted. And the halacha describes what avodas perach means, what it includes. Simply put, avodas perach means that when he is working and he cannot relate to his work. He doesn't know where it begins, where it ends, what he is doing. Why? Why is this perach? Because a human being, again, has a brain, and he has to be able to relate to what it is that he's doing. And if he cannot relate to what he's doing, then he is working like an animal rather than a human being. And this is the crux of the problem. When we lose sight of this truth which we discussed today, then all what we are doing, we are relating to it as how an animal works. We are just doing. We don't sense the accomplishment. We're not relating to the accomplishment. We're relating to the purpose and the meaning of our lives. We're relating to the fact that we are working. So here the human being is being reduced to the psychology of Lahavla and animal. That's indeed very painful for a human being. But it's in our hands to raise ourselves up to the human level. And it's all in our perception and our understanding what it is really true, what is the real truth is. The first thing we do in the morning when we wake up is we say Moidani. What is Moidani? Moidani expresses the core of our recognition of what it means I woke up. Instead of thinking like a man is wont to do, he woke up, okay, who are the clients I have to see today, and what am I going to say to them, and how am I going to needle and wheedle with them, and how am I going to finagle this and finagle that? Or the woman wakes up and says, okay, or the baby's crying, oh, please stop crying. The first thing we say is Moidani, which we say immediately when we wake up, and this and represents the crux of our lives. I woke up and I have a real life. Why am I here? Because Hashem returned my neshama. That's the first thing that I recognize. I'm not here by accident. I'm not just here to carry the burden another day. The Bnei Shalom renewed the world and renewed my life. What does my life represent now? Hashem renewed it, refreshed it. That is the life we are relating to. This is the life we are living. And until the time that we have the Geula Shleima, there is labors that we have to perform sometimes that we don't appreciate. But that doesn't define who we are. It doesn't define what we are doing. This is way below our conscious of what we are and what we are actually engaged in. What this is all about. I want it to be very clear. We all appreciate and value immensely our freedom in general, and freedom of maneuver. The fact that I can get up and go whatever I want, whenever I want. Simply put, I'm not in prison. I have freedom to go out, to come in, and do what I want. This, we say, is living. One person who is confined to a prison cell, we say, oh, that is so painful, that is terrible. And what's so terrible about it? He has his daladamas, his 4 amas, he has his food. To live like an animal is perfectly acceptable. I mean, it's perfectly fine. That's how animals live. You ever go to a horse stall or an animal farm? The cows stand over there in rows, and they stand and they're quite happy eating their hay. And a human being is extremely pained if he is confined. If he is not confined and he is in his home and he is free to go, does he go running around the whole world wherever he can go, wherever his feet can carry him? Absolutely not. He sits and knows in the same place. So then what is the difference? Well, I want to show a different, a broader, a deeper perception of that. What is choice? And we go through all the gyrations from choice all the way up. I want to go straight to the heart of it. Yes, it is choice. Yes, it is other things. Where is the heart of it? The heart of it is that he is living in a real world. Whereas when he is in a prison, he's not living in a real world. That's the crux. Whatever you do, you confine to your home because you're taking care of your children. You are living in a real world. And that's what human life is about. And if one is confined, like one is in a prison, regardless of its size, even if you can go around, run around and play tennis, you're in a prison. And ask any tennis player in prison how much he will give to give up all the tennis that he's got over there just to get out of that prison. Because he's not for real. We are really for real. Every moment of our lives is real, regardless of what we do. What defines us is the reality, the real reality that the Rebbe provides on our lives. Not what we do, what duties we have. We have these duties precisely because we have that great reality. In conclusion, if you read it again, it is absolutely necessary, it's a must, that we bring this reality into our lives. I tell you, said for Avodas Hashem, no question about it, but simply for on a human basis. If we are frustrated, we should look not to change our activities, but to change our perception of ourselves. And not to change our perception, but to realize our perception. To realize the truth of ourselves. And bring in real life, real happiness, real brightness in ourselves, in our families, in our home, and in the world. This is my monologue for today. If anybody wants some clarification, you can anytime ask now, later, anytime. But this is the truth. This is the truth that we know from the Torah. remote from Jewish life, and this is inevitable. It must be attended. Any problem that we have, really, in ultimate sense, cannot be handled without recognizing who we are. And we are very, very great. Because we have a neshama, we have a great God.